Good evening, I'm Maggie Lennon and welcome to Scotland at 7. Before we start with the news stories proper, we'll go through the coronavirus statistics. As of 2 o'clock today, a total of 1,861,999 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and UK government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,639,838 have been confirmed negative, leaving 222,161 with a positive test. There are 199 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. Not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all of those with symptoms will be tested. There are no new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,630. And this number only includes those who've died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 154 were in hospital last night, 21 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 o'clock this morning, 2,668,723 people had received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 590,174 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show 127,100 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 13 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. I'm delighted to welcome as my guest to the programme today Sam Paton, Broadcasting Scotland regular. These are sobering figures, aren't they, Sam?
They are, and it's quite sad, isn't it? And it's always worth remembering the people that are behind those figures, and the families and the loved ones that have been affected by COVID-19 in the last year, and hopefully these figures will continue to go down in the future.
Yes, it's looking good in Scotland. Things seem to be falling into place. I'm going to kick off with an interesting report that's come out of England today. Philip Rycroft, a civil servant, says that the Prime Minister's muscular brand of unionism has deepened divisions between the four nations of the United Kingdom. The pandemic has seeded the idea of a Prime Minister who speaks for England alone, as relations between the four nations of the UK deteriorate amid deep-rooted complacency, the former civil servant has warned. There is widespread ignorance towards the union, meaning ministers can be kept in the dark about major reforms with little consideration for the four nations, says Rycroft, who was permanent secretary to the Brexit department until 2019. His damning conclusion says the 300-year-old union is in deep peril, and even major political ructions, such as the close-run 2014 Scottish referendum and the following year's SNP landslide, prompted little soul-searching in Westminster. Boris Johnson's union unit in the cabinet has been plagued by infighting over strategy amid growing momentum for a second referendum on Scottish independence and the deterioration of relations in Northern Ireland following the Brexit deal. In recent days, clashes described as the worst street violence in years have taken place. Commenting on the report, the SNP's deputy leader Keith Brown said, "Westminster has repeatedly shown it cannot be trusted with Scotland's future, and this report shows how deeply that failure runs. Devolution has helped to move Scotland forward, building on the fundamental and democratic principle that the Parliament and the government elected by the Scottish people should make decisions for Scotland." That's quite a report, Sam. And a few people have often said, it may be that Scotland gets independence not because she takes it, but because Westminster gives it away. Westminster are seeming a bit careless, don't you think?
They are, Maggie. I mean, going by what's happened in the last couple of years, never mind the last 10 years, Westminster have lost touch with what's happened in the devolved nations and how the people live and how they interact. And the referendum on Brexit proved that when it came to Scotland and Northern Ireland, who wanted to remain part of Europe, they have totally lost touch. And what seems to be happening right now, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but it's quite literally they are giving us independence. They are, they're holding on to us. It's like we're going through a bad divorce settlement. If they don't want us, but nobody else is allowed to have us, so to speak. But yeah, they are certainly holding on to us, but they are literally pushing us away, and they have forgotten, or they didn't actually realise that arrogance has led them to believe that they don't need to worry about the Scots or the Welsh or the Irish, and we'll just always fall into line. And what's been happening over the last few years shows that we have our own way of doing things, which is very much with COVID proven so, that we have our very much way of our own way of doing things, and that's not fallen into line. If anything, England's ended up following the lead of Scotland, Wales and Ireland when it comes to COVID.
There's a huge amount of ambivalence too, isn't there, amongst English voters themselves about Scotland. I think they're getting a bit fed up of us. You hear that more and more. If they want to go, just let them go. We've had enough. And the growth of English nationalism, which is a defensive nationalism, very different from the sort of civic nationalism that we hope will triumph in Scotland, seems to play to that agenda. So I wonder whether, if Westminster are showing less interest in holding on to Scotland, it's playing to that core demographic in their own voter support.
Yeah, well, the thing is they're not showing interest in terms of the Scotland as a nation, but they're certainly showing interest in terms of our finances and what we offer, and what they can gain out of Scotland in that sense. But yeah, you're right. There is a difference between the nationalists down in England, which is very much quite deep-rooted right-wing bigotry and hatred, whereas when people talk about the I'm going to use the word nationalist, but I don't actually like using it, but the Yes movement up here in Scotland, it is certainly completely polar opposites. It's people talking about, we are one family, we are all together, we're going to move forward as one. And as much as we may have our infighting amongst ourselves, we definitely do move forward as one. And I think with Boris Johnson and some of the English voters, not all, but some of them, there is this we're pesky, we're a nuisance, how dare we have a voice and stand up and air our views and want a better life and want a better standard of life for our children and grandchildren and future generations. And, yes, a lot of them are getting fed up with us, which is quite nice, because maybe then they'll let us go. However, I don't think that's going to happen easily. I think it will happen, but I don't think it's going to be easy. As I had said before, it's like, the kind of bad divorce. But however, it's interesting to see what's happening right now. Politics is certainly very interesting at the moment, in terms of the UK, because you can literally see it falling apart in front of your eyes.
We've known for a while that there is an element of the Conservative Party, despite the fact that the Conservative and Unionist Party, who would quite like to be shot of the north of Ireland. And Dominic Cummings' famous quote about he didn't care if Northern Ireland fell into the sea. And the fact that Johnson is refusing, point blank, to hold any kind of summit with the Irish government, to which he's been asked to participate over the current issues and problems that the north is facing, would kind of underlie that maybe they would just kind of like the north to disappear. But of course, the slight problem with that is there's a lot of unionists in the north of Ireland who really don't want to go anywhere. And what's happening among some of the unionist communities in the north of Ireland, I think, is they've woken up to the fact that they care more about the union than the union cares about them. And I think that's happening too a little bit in Scotland, that people who were keen on the union are now thinking, well, do you know what, maybe they're not as bothered about keeping us. And that might be the final thing that really pushes the independence movement over the line.
Yeah, I agree with you totally there, Maggie. Totally agree with everything you've just said, yeah.
I think it's interesting that when Keith Brown was responding to the report, he focused very heavily on the importance of devolution. And of course, devolution has had a bit of a kicking. Just today, the UK government is to refer 2 Holyrood laws to the UK Supreme Court. There were laws passed by the Scottish Parliament last month, which were 2 bills which would incorporate the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and the European Charter of Local Self-Government into Scots law, unanimously supported by the Scottish Parliament. And after they were passed, the UK government said they might refer them to the Supreme Court. That's what they've decided to do. So commenting on the move, SNP Westminster leader Ian Blackford said in a tweet that Boris Johnson is going out of his way to torpedo the bungled Tory election campaign in Scotland. No wonder the Tories are sinking in the polls when their priority is attacking devolution and damaging children's rights. Now, this is very serious. If laws which have been passed by the Scottish Parliament unanimously, all parties voting to agree, can be challenged in the Supreme Court, surely that's a complete and unveiled attack on the devolution process. And where do you think that might end?
It certainly is, and it undermines the sovereignty of our Parliament at the end of the day. Under the Scotland Act for devolution, we have got the right. And I was kind of having a quick read up in this. I mean, these laws, the fact that they are attacking children's rights for a start, which gives a child the right to basically to take the government to court, i.e. for education, freedom from violence and abuse and neglect, be listened to, take it seriously. They have the right to have proper home, food and clothing, and they have the right to relax. How can anybody turn round and deny children these basic rights in this day and age? And that is just absolutely fundamentally wrong. And it just goes to show you that they are, one, attacking devolution, they're attacking the children of Scotland, and they are totally out of touch with the people of Scotland, and that includes their own party up in Scotland. And I hope the Scottish Tories actually stand up and actually open their mouths and be counted for.
Oh, you mean the way the Scottish Tories stood up and be counted when they said, if there's a border in the Irish Sea, we'll all resign? And they haven't.
Oh, yeah,
so I wouldn't hold your breath, Sam, on the Scottish Tories standing up. Boris Johnson.
Definitely not. But however, they should, because it is children. It is their children. It is our children. It is somebody else's child, and it is their children as well. This is going to affect. This is also going to affect their children's education.
It does seem an odd one to pick of all the things. So when Holyrood returns after the election, there is a plan to incorporate 4 other major pieces of international human rights and equalities protection law into Scotland. So I'm wondering whether this is a shot across the bows of the Scottish Government to say, well, if you do that with these 2, we're going to challenge these as well. The reason seems to be twofold. The UK government are very ambivalent about the adoption of international treaties into domestic law. And what they're claiming is that these international law treaties will undercut completely the ability for Westminster to still pass laws in Scotland over things that are reserved. Now, obviously, education and things that you've just mentioned that are covered by the bill and the rights that are protected are all reserved. But I'm thinking it's more around things around maybe immigration law, around defence, possibly around employment law. These are all things that are reserved to Westminster, and that they might see this international treaty in particular weakening. That seems to be the basis on which they're challenged. But this seems to me to be a really important and critical challenge, because depending what the Supreme Court say, it could open us up to huge amounts of attack in the future, or it could really undermine, rather strengthen the role of the Scottish Parliament. So it's pretty crucial. It's not getting a lot of coverage in the mainstream media, which is perhaps not a surprise, but I think we really have to keep our eye on this. But it's interesting, isn't it, Sam, that here we have a Scottish Parliament who is committed to human rights law. It is attempting to be the legislator in the world that is most committed to human rights and equality protections. It does seem a bit strange then, does it not, that a government who has that commitment, and especially to children's rights, could also be a government who is possibly suggesting the age of sexual consent of children is reduced to 10 years old. Doesn't add up, does it really?
Well, the thing is I'm going to disagree with you here, because nobody has turned round and said about reducing the age to 10 years old for sex. If you actually read the document, you will see that this document is international. Document which covers all sorts of laws around the world. So I think people need to be careful and read the documentation. But in terms of children's rights, I think that the UK government has picked us deliberately and to try and undermine Holyrood. And also as well, they have turned round and picked the perfect time when we are in campaign mode for Holyrood elections, and which is going to be so our Parliament is effectively suspended at the moment, and but obviously they are keeping an eye on things. And the problem is with Westminster, with these international treaties, they're trying to claim, and this is the difficult bit and this is the serious bit here, is they're trying to use the claim that international treaties cannot be incorporated into authorities, local authorities. So basically by doing this, they're trying to say that Scotland isn't a nation and doesn't have a right to incorporate these international treaties. They're trying to say that we are a local authority, and that has very serious implications. As you says, with the Supreme Court, it could go either both ways. It could either go to the point where Scotland's powers are strengthened, but it could also go to the point where we lose our devolved powers. We could even lose our international, our standing in our own, having our right to our own laws. So there is a lot of other complications and implications there that need to be hopefully addressed by the Scottish lawmakers, and make sure that we have a good case that if the UK government do take this to the Supreme Court, that we do have all our I's dotted, our T's ticked, and we are there protecting the rights of children and human rights.
And just to clarify, the reason I raised the issue about even suggesting that the Scottish Government could even consciously ever think about changing the age of consent, it was to make the point that why would anybody give any credence to that slur that has come out recently to the Scottish Government? And clearly the Scottish Government's record on children's rights is incredibly impressive. Moving on then, but still staying with Westminster, number 10, we are told, is to launch an independent investigation into former Prime Minister David Cameron's lobbying for the now collapsed Greensill Capital Company and the role of the scandal-hit financier Lex Greensill in government. The independent review, commissioned by Boris Johnson, will be led by the legal expert Nigel Boardman, a non-executive board member of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. It will look at the development and use of supply chain finance offered by Greensill and its associated activities in government and the role that Greensill played in those. Johnson's spokesman said there was significant interest in this matter, So the Prime Minister has called for the review to ensure government is completely transparent about such activities and that the public can see for themselves if good value was secured for taxpayers' money. It's understood the review will look at Cameron's lobbying after his time in government, with Number 10 saying the inquiry will also look at how contracts were secured and how business representatives engaged with government. Well, I am tempted to say it's a bit little, a bit late, given the scandal hit government with procurement for chums. But just so that viewers can be up to speed, it transpired that Lex Greensill was employed, not paid admittedly, as a special advisor to David Cameron when David Cameron was in power. And when David Cameron left government, he went to work for Lex Greensill. And what he's been lobbying for was trying to get access to government loans for Greensill. Greensill collapsed a few months ago, and that has serious implications, not least because they were financing Liberty Steel. Something like 3,000 jobs, including jobs in Scotland, could well be at risk because of the collapse of Greensill. Cameron has admitted that he didn't use formal channels. He was texting the Chancellor and having private drinks. So really, I think the important thing about this inquiry isn't whether taxpayers got value for money, but really it has to look at the lobbying activity of a previous Prime Minister. What do you think, Sam?
Personally, I think it's going to be a tick box exercise, as normally happens with these things. You know, as you said, it's too little, too late. There should have been something. Somebody should have been looking into this a long time ago, in terms of what goes on in Downing Street with lobbying and so forth. I mean, you see allegations of various ex-MPs, PMs and so forth, working for companies and lobbying on behalf, and basically, once their time is up. And I think that, there needs to be stricter, I don't know, procedures, I don't know. But however, I just believe that this is going to be a tick box exercise. They're going to, because it's came into the public domain, they will investigate it, make it look good, and nothing much will actually happen at the end of it, I'm afraid. So I don't see any hope that there's going to be any criminal proceedings of anything like that at all.
Oh, no, I don't imagine for a minute there'll be criminal proceedings, because we know there's been no criminal proceedings made against Hancock or any of the others who've been caught with dubious questions about procurement practices. It should be noted that Greensill did not receive any of the government loans. He didn't get any of the money, which may or may not be why they collapsed, although apparently the business model for Greensill was dubious for a number of years, so long before Cameron was involved with them. But, I mean, it's interesting. Cameron has been denying this for months and saying that nothing was wrong. And then suddenly, I guess because more has come out, he's had to be honest about it and say he didn't behave appropriately. Interesting, Gordon Brown comes to the fore again, making accusations about how important it is that former prime ministers are seen to do the right thing. So the suggestion is he is behind this push for an investigation. I have to say I'm a little bit surprised that the Westminster government are even going to have an investigation, but it seems to be fairly internal. So you're right, Sam, maybe not very much will happen. On another note entirely, and this is wonderful news for primary school children across Scotland, the Scottish Greens pledge to end primary school homework. Hurrah! The Scottish Greens are set to propose an end to homework in primary schools, pointing to evidence that rather than helping to improve attainment, it can often have a harmful effect on younger children's attitude towards learning. The proposal, to be unveiled at the party's manifesto launch on Wednesday, is part of a wider package of measures aimed at giving children more opportunities to play and socialise with friends after the pandemic. The Greens' aim is to help children and young people catch up on the social development they have lost through a year of on and off remote learning and repeated lockdowns. Research commissioned by the Scottish Green MSPs has outlined that homework in primary school can actually have a harmful effect on learning due to younger children's lack of motivation for additional schoolwork. Further research has also suggested homework can worsen inequality as it disadvantages children whose home environment makes completing it difficult. Now, Sam, I happen to know this is an issue that is close to your heart because am I not right in thinking that your own son started a petition about school homework? Would you want to tell us about that?
Yes, thanks to Ross Greer, the MSP for the Greens in the west of Scotland. Yes, it's his fault. I put the blame on him. Sorry, Ross. But my son had a chat with Ross and basically had said to him that this is going back about to 2000 and we're in 2021, 2019. And basically he had said to Ross Greer that Ross was asking him how he got on at school, and he says, fine, but I don't like homework because of, and he started getting into the reasons why he doesn't like homework, and he refuses to do homework, and he has done since primary 1. Now he's now in primary 5. And basically he says it's against his children's rights to be doing homework because it takes away his right to be safe, happy, and to have fun and to be a child. So he says that when he comes home from school, he's got the right to go out and socialise and play with his friends and have fun and not to be stressed. And when sitting doing homework, basically makes him stressed and it stops his ability from socialising. Now that's Christopher's argument, which is actually not a bad argument for a wee boy going back a couple of years ago. So he then, on the encouragement of Ross Greer, he basically started a petition and took it to Holyrood, got Ross and some of the staff there to sign it, including some of the security staff and so forth at Holyrood. And he went back and he took it to his school, went round our village, and unfortunately lockdown kicked in, so he was never able to present it back to Ross or to John Swinney, as who he was wanting to present it to. But what he has accomplished within his own school is that in primary 5, they no longer get homework. His class no longer receives homework. And even though they've been in lockdown and doing home schooling, they hold up.
I'm going out to play.
Yeah, okay, sorry, that's him just telling me that he's going to play. I mean, he was going to come on and actually tell you himself about this, but he's decided to get out to play and socialise is more important, you know, the important bit of being a child. So anyway, so he basically achieved a no homework status for his class in primary school. He's been successful in his wee petition and his wee campaign, and today when I told him what was happening, he was absolutely delighted. And knowing Christopher, his head is massive and got a huge ego, and he's like, that's because of me. So there we go. According to him, the Greens have went adopted this.
He may well be the origin of this. He's certainly going to be extremely popular with his classmates, you know, those in primary 5 who've had no homework. But on a serious side, the point that the Greens make about the inequality of homework is a valid one, is it not?
It is, because the thing is not all kids have the kind of stable environment that homework is required. And I'm not talking about families who there may be substance abuse or poverty or things. I'm just talking about sometimes you get kids in families where they've got siblings who are younger or older, and you know you've got the normal family noise and chaos going on. To sit there and do homework with all the distractions of life going on, it can be very stressful. And you know, it's a bit unfair to expect kids to be able to shut off from that and to be able to cope with that. And also as well, when you're dealing with families who may have a lot of other family issues and problems going on, you know, there may not be anybody there to support the kids who are able to support the kids. And I know with Christopher, talking from a personal experience, Christopher's got problems with his eyesight, which was not really dealt with until he was in primary two. So him sitting doing homework was actually very stressful because he couldn't see properly, and trying to get the school and the teachers and everybody to recognise that was, it took quite a lot of meetings, quite a lot of interactions with the school, which was exhausting for me, and it wasn't very fair. Now he wears glasses, now his eyesight is being corrected, you know, and I would imagine, you know, but unfortunately he had to wait until he was a certain age to be able to go through that. So for some kids, there's lots of different reasons why they find homework very, very stressful. And to be honest, for kids, when they get home, get the uniforms off and let them go out to play and go and experience the outside environment. You know, go and get dirty, get wet, get out in the sunshine.
And the other side of that coin is how many parents actually are the ones that do the homework. We've all done it as parents. We've all stepped in and gone, well, maybe we could improve that assignment a wee bit, and maybe we could just help, not with maths. Nobody can do maths. But given increasingly as children's attainment is measured by continual assessment, then it is unfair if you have parents who are going to be able to help with that homework a bit more and have the time to do that. So I think they may be on to something here. So well done to Christopher. Certainly, as a parent of a daughter who is now in her 30s, so a long time since I had to wrestle with the dreaded homework diary. We never quite managed to crack the homework diary strategy. But one thing that will be sad, just think, no more the dog ate my homework stories. And moving on to something much more serious and almost unbelievable given what happened in Minneapolis quite recently. Protests have erupted after Minneapolis police shoot a black man in a traffic stop. Police fired tear gas and rubber bullets as angry protests erupted in a Minneapolis suburb after a 20-year-old black man was shot dead during a traffic stop. The unrest in Brooklyn Center came hours before the trial of Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer charged with murdering George Floyd, was set to resume in a courtroom less than 10 miles away. Outside of the Brooklyn Center Police Department on Sunday night, smoke billowed as a line of police officers fired rubber bullets and chemical agents at protesters, some of whom lobbed rocks, bags of garbage and water bottles at the police. The man killed by police was identified by relatives and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as Daunte Wright, aged 20. Walz said in a statement that he was monitoring the unrest as our state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement. Wright's mother, Katie Wright, told reporters at the scene that she had received a call from her son on Sunday afternoon, telling her that police had pulled him over for having air fresheners dangling from his rear view mirror, illegal in Minnesota. She could hear police tell her son to get out the vehicle, she said. I heard scuffling and I heard police officers say, Daunte, don't run, she said through her tears. The call ended. When she dialed his number again, his girlfriend answered and said he was dead in the driver's seat. In a statement, Brooklyn Center Police said officers pulled over a man for a traffic violation just before 2 p.m. and found he had an outstanding arrest warrant. As police tried to arrest him, he got back in the car. One officer shot the man who was not identified in the statement. The man drove several blocks before striking another vehicle and dying at the scene. Police say both officers' body cameras were recording during the incident. The state's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension said it was investigating the shooting. This is unbelievable. Just as the trial of Chauvin is going on, this happens. The fact is, this young man would not have been pulled over for dangling air fresheners if he'd been white, would he?
Definitely not. It seems to be they're not learning. The lessons definitely not learned. I seen this story just before I came on air this evening, and it's just unbelievable. It's beggars belief after everything that's been going on and everything's been happening, and with the trial ongoing at the moment, this happens. Another life lost, another life unnecessarily lost. It doesn't matter what happened. There is no excuse whatsoever for a police officer to then pull out his weapon and fire point blank. I believe that's what I had read earlier on. The gun was fired point blank, and then he drove off. And when the car crashed, he was pronounced dead at the scene. But it's just absolutely horrendous. They pull him over for air fresheners dangling. Well, as you say, that wouldn't happen if it had been a white man. And then it just escalates into something like this. It's just beggars belief. It's just
the police seem to be.
It's just
The police seem to be saying that it was almost justified because after they'd pulled him over, they found out he had an outstanding arrest warrant. But they couldn't have known that when they pulled him over. They couldn't have known that when they pulled him over. And I mean, I think this is the problem that people are complaining about. That there is a much higher chance in the States that you'll be pulled over by the police if you're black. It's also, to be frank, the case in the UK as well. From the days of the stop and search sus laws up to now, you're much more likely, and it's like a fishing expedition, pull you over to see what they can find, looking for drugs probably, finding out if you're under the influence. But one of the kind of unbelievable things that's happened as a result of this, so the prosecution's case in the Chauvin trial, I believe, is just finishing, and the defence case is about to start. Chauvin's lawyers have leapt onto this and said, we think that this incident will prejudice the case against our client. I can see Chauvin's defence team trying to push for a mistrial on this because, of course, what it seems to indicate is that the police in Minneapolis are really down on the black population, are willing to cause damage and harm to them with no justification, and therefore it makes it more likely that George Floyd was murdered by Chauvin, although all the evidence being heard so far is certainly playing to the prosecution's case that it was being denied oxygen for 9 minutes after the police officer leant on his neck that killed him, and not anything else. But it really does strike you as what needs to happen in the United States in order to stop these atrocities. We know that there are more black people in prison in the United States than there are in college. Biden is trying to do quite a lot about gun control. Clearly this whole thing, Sam, has been exacerbated by the fact that the police are armed.
Yeah, this is one of the problems, isn't it? But I think it goes deeper than that. It's a societal cancer, isn't it? Really. And how do you change that? How do you rid a culture, a country of a societal cancer? And everybody can sit and debate about this all day long. But how do you rid it? Who's got the answer? Is it education? Is it more when they are checking out people who wish to join the law enforcement agencies? Is it doing more stringent checks? Is it about doing more psychological checks more often? And when it comes to the courts, should they be doing the same there with the people involved? Whether it's the prosecutors or the judges, or how far do you need to go to get rid of this? And how far is the public and the citizens of America willing to go to get rid of this. But one of the things that I had seen before I came on air was the car that this young fella was driving. The family had bought that car. It wasn't even his car, it was his family had bought that car for him. So the police wouldn't have known. And he was there with his girlfriend. They wouldn't have known that he had an outstanding warrant.
No, it was a fishing expedition, clearly.
Yeah, and that's all it was. So they
must
wouldn't
have thought,
have known.
They must have thought, gosh, we've scored really well, outstanding arrest warrant. The
And-
most we were hoping for was maybe a bag of dope in the back seat or something.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, I mean, that just goes to show you, this young fella's driving down the road. He knows there's a warrant out for his arrest, and he panics when the police stop. I mean, the thing is, this is what we need to get with people in society, including here in the UK and in America and around. When the police approach people, even if you're completely innocent, or you let traffic pull you over, you tend to go into that panic mode. Everybody does it, and it's fight or flight. Some people it's more serious. But yeah, there is. I don't know what the answer is for America. I hope Biden manages to make some sort of mark in changing this, but I think it's going to take generations, and it should have been by now. America should have been kind of getting there, but unfortunately with the Trump administration they've went backwards. It's put America back decades in terms of racial equality.
Your point is right. You get stopped by the police, you're automatic. Even if you know you've done nothing wrong, you think, oh my goodness, what are they going to find out? And African Americans must be absolutely justified at thinking if they get stopped by the police, it's going to end badly for them. And as if to prove that point, another story has just kind of broken along the same lines. A Virginia police officer accused of assaulting a US Army officer has been fired. One of two police officers in Virginia accused of assaulting a US Army lieutenant by pointing their guns and pepper spraying him during a traffic stop has been fired, according to an official statement. Officer Joe Gutierrez was terminated from his employment after an investigation determined he did not follow policies of the local police department, the town of Windsor, Virginia, said in a statement on Sunday. The statement did not detail any breaches or punishments for the other officer involved in the incident, a Daniel Crocker. The firing comes after Army officer Karen Nazario filed a lawsuit against the two police officers in federal court over what court papers say was a violent traffic stop on December the 5th, 2020, when officers pointed their guns, knocked him to the ground and pepper sprayed him and, quote, threatened to murder him. So what we've just seen is that incident in Minneapolis is not an incident that on its own. This is happening all of the time. And is it any wonder that communities flare up into unrest and civil disobedience?
Well, the thing is, that's just proven that they are acting, they are basically making decisions based on people's race. And it's happening on a regular basis, and it seems to be the normality over America, which is wrong. So then you've got to start questioning is what is the policing authorities, agencies doing about it in terms of the ones higher up? What are they teaching? What are they actually teaching these people that are on the streets? What are they encouraging when they are doing their briefings and they're doing their ongoing training in the stations or out with the stations? What are they actually teaching? They must be teaching some horrific stuff. If that's the way, if police officers, whether it's traffic or on the street cops or whatever, if they think this is acceptable and normal behaviour, what are they being taught?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a real crisis, and I'm sure that the unrest that's happening in Minneapolis is going to continue. And you almost feel it's almost as if George Floyd didn't happen and that the Black Lives Matter campaign didn't happen. As you say, it's continuing, and questions have to be asked about the training of officers and the manner in which weapons are pulled and for what reasons. So I hope there isn't too much trouble in Minneapolis. I hope no one else dies as a result of this, but you'd have to say it's pretty scary. Coming back to Europe for the next story, France have just announced that they're going to ban some domestic flights where alternative train travel is available. French MPs have voted to suspend domestic airline flights on routes that can be travelled by direct train in less than 2.5 hours, as part of a series of climate and environmental measures. After a heated debate in the Assemblée Nationale at the weekend, the ban, a watered-down version of a key recommendation from President Macron's Citizens' Climate Convention, was finally adopted. It will mean the end of short internal flights from Orly Airport, south of Paris, to Nantes and Bordeaux, amongst others, though connecting flights through Charles de Gaulle Airport, north of the French capital, will continue. The Climate Commission set up by Macron had originally recommended the scrapping of all flights between French destinations where an alternative direct train journey of less than 4 hours existed. This was reduced to 2.5 hours after strong objections from certain regions and from Air France KLM, which, like other airlines, has been badly hit by local and international COVID-19 restrictions on travel. This is quite a remarkable decision by the French government, is it not, Sam?
Yeah, I think it's very brave and well done to them. And at the end of the day, it's a bit of common sense. I mean, I think the travel banning flights for up to 4 hours is a bit extreme, because there is times where people need to get there a bit quicker, and if you've got trains and things like that. But, for 2 hours, I think that's a bit more common sense. I mean, we're trying to encourage people to use more public transport and to travel more environmentally friendly, more economically. And the thing is with the trains, travelling for 2 hours, sometimes it's easier to get a train. The train station's closer to your home, whereas going to an airport, especially where I stay, I'm a 40-minute drive away from the airport. So I can't get I'm not able to get direct public transport to the airport. I would need to go through a bus, train, and then I think it would be a bus again. I'm trying to think. Whereas, you go by car, most people from here go by car. But if you were to jump on a train, which is only a 15-minute walk, which I have done, I've got the train down to Wales and things, and down to various parts of England and back and forth. You can get it literally to your back door, and it's so much easier. And I actually don't mind going in trains and things. And yes, it maybe take a bit longer.
But by the time you factor in going through security at an airport and having to be there a certain amount of time before your flight, it really can add to the time. So I was just having a look at the map today and thinking, if we impose this in Scotland, it would mean that you could no longer probably fly to Aberdeen from Glasgow or Edinburgh. It might just at a push mean you couldn't fly to Inverness from Edinburgh, probably not Glasgow. But down south, it would mean no domestic flights from London, say, to Manchester or Birmingham. But then we've just, and I say we, because although we won't get the benefit, Scotland are paying for it, we've just invested in HS2 and high-speed rail travel.
Yeah.
So that's fair enough, is it not? I mean, what's the point of having trains that are going to scoot you around the country if you can still fly? So I'm just wondering if this might be picked up at all by the Greens up here in Scotland or in the UK. I don't know if you've heard anything about that, Sam?
I've not, but I think it would be definitely worth them looking into, because it's certainly got a lot of benefits. I mean, as you say, by the time you go through security and things like that's all time consuming. And if you can get a train back and forth, between Glasgow and Edinburgh or Glasgow and Inverness, and a train journey can be quite pleasant. It's actually quite nice, and you don't need to worry about turbulence or anything, and you're just kind of taken straight to your destination. I hope it is taken up by the Greens and other parties as well, because it is worth, especially now that we're nationalising our railways, it would make sense to be utilising them more and to be using them.
I wonder though
Encouraging
if it doesn't mean that you do need to invest in that railway infrastructure. I mean, France is one of these very fortunate European countries where the French rail system is fantastic. It's extremely extensive. There's very few corners of France you can't get to on a good high-speed train. Obviously, that's not the case in the UK. There are still parts of the country which are still suffering from the bitumen cuts in the 1960s. So there would need to be an extra investment in that. But the story as reported doesn't give specifics about what that impact on climate change will be. But I was thinking if that was extended across Europe, if all mainland European countries imposed the same, and most mainland European countries do have good and integrated train travel, it would make a huge difference. So I wonder whether this is maybe the start of something. And it's interesting, the debate raged, apparently, it was pretty stormy stuff. And, you know, the French are keen on a stormy debate. One of the issues in particular was split between those who felt it was going to be damaging to jobs in the airline industry. So the socialists were very opposed to it because they were worried about the impact on jobs, not least because obviously airlines have suffered during the pandemic. But the Greens were saying, well, it hasn't gone far enough, and they really were wanting to impose the 4-hour recommendation, which was in the original report. But I just wonder what the impact would be if this was more widely accepted in Europe. And heavens, what about in the United States? You know,
well, if you think of it, during our first lockdown last year, when the planes were pretty much grounded, people were noticing the air quality changing. It was improving. There was less pollution. Yes, fair dues. There was less traffic on the roads as well, but more people were using trains. Well, saying that, it was only the frontline workers that were working, but the trains were getting used. So we did notice a difference in the air quality last year. And so right away, that was an instant impact to less planes in the skies. And, and you could start getting into all the kind of carbon emissions and the carbon footprint and so forth and the science behind it. But also as well, I can understand where people are worried about the jobs in the airline industries. But if you were going to be encouraging everybody to be using the train infrastructure, they've got to employ more staff to deal with the extra passengers. And if you think of Scotland, I mean, our Network Rail misses out huge chunks of Scotland, absolutely misses out huge chunks. And we've got to rely on the private car. And we've got no choice. But if we were to invest more in our railways and get there's some parts that you're never going to be able to basically build a railway line in Scotland. But if you could invest extra money into the infrastructure and build into other communities that are currently cut off from the railway system, again, that creates jobs. And it also makes it easier for people travelling into the cities for work. Because what's happening in a lot of the rural communities as well at the moment is a lot of people are leaving and travelling into the cities because they can't find work, or they, so they leave the rural communities. So the rural communities are now becoming, the age population's getting higher and higher because the youngsters are leaving. Whereas if you've got good network transport set up, you've got younger families again. You're reinvigorating these communities and encouraging people to live there as well. So there's a lot of benefits.
It's a bold move for France, I have to say. And I mean, you tend to, when you think about the sort of driver of the green movement in Europe, you tend to always think about Germany. Actually, it's actually where the green movement began. But it is a bold move, and I would be really interested to see if other parts of Europe were going to consider this. I think, as you say, we did notice a huge difference in the air pollution as a result of COVID. And I think it's something that would get a lot of support, but you have to invest in the railways, and that's crucial, something
Yes.
the UK hasn't been particularly good at in the past. Our final story of the day, in a week when lots of famous people have died, is the announcement that Shirley Williams has died at the age of 90. Lady Shirley Williams, one of the original gang of 4 Labour politicians who split to form the Social Democratic Party, has died, the Liberal Democrats have announced. She became the MP for Hitchin in 1964 and stepped down from the House of Lords in 2016, having served more than 50 years in politics. During her career, Williams was a Labour cabinet minister under James Callaghan and later became the first SDP member elected in a by-election in 1981. She became president of the new party and supported its merger with the Liberals to form the Liberal Democrats. Shirley Williams was a bit of a powerhouse in the Labour movement. I grew up in the Labour movement. I grew up seeing her and Barbara Castle and women like that being held up as an example to myself, a young woman who was interested in politics and thought I might have made my future in politics, as someone to watch. It's a bit unfortunate almost. She was always rather compared to Barbara Castle, who was much more glamorous, and the media, as ever, tend to judge women, especially women in politics, by what they look like. So she was often, although contemporary with Barbara Castle, often unfairly judged against them. But she was someone who was, led the way for women in politics, and therefore all women in politics should be grateful to women like her. Do you have any opinion of Shirley Williams? What did you make of her as a politician?
I'm afraid I'm going to say no, because I didn't know who she was until today.
Oh my goodness!
I'm too young to remember her being part of the Labour movement and things.
Sam.
But however, like everybody, it's, again, condolences to the family and things. And, she's obviously, been one of these strong, powerful women and, who have laid the path for other women to follow. And that I'm grateful. But apart from that, I'm sorry, but.
Well, I mean, the key thing is that she was one of the so-called Gang of 4 with David Owen, Will Rogers and Roy Jenkins, who split from the Labour Party because they were concerned about the drift to the left, specifically under Michael Foot. And it was an attempt to form centrist politics that was closer to a European model. Now, obviously, in a first-past-the-post system that Westminster operates in, and that was before devolution, there was never really a place for that to go anywhere, and it was already encroaching, if you like, on the territory of the Liberal Party, which is ultimately why they joined together. But she did, I think, try to break that mould of politics. She was a committed European, and as a result, she often fell out with her own party over that. The Labour Party, as you may know, were not fully committed to joining Europe when Edward Heath took us in the 70s. There was a real split in the party. But I think she really thought she was going to break the mould of British politics and take it out of that two-party system, which, of course, has never happened because the Liberals have never made that breakthrough. But then you're not going to do that in a first-past-the-post system. She'd have had much more luck doing that in a situation up here. And then obviously there was all the confusion about, well, how did it fit with the Liberals? And then they formed the Liberal Democrats, having gone through various name changes before that. But I don't think we should forget that she was a feminist. Her mother was the pacifist and feminist Vera Brittain, and novelist. She often referred to her mother as being an inspiring but distant mother. So she kind of cut her teeth, if you like, on feminism and really radical socialism as a younger woman, but concerned about the drift to the left. She was also someone who was quite good at the pithy quote. And I had a quick look at some of her quotes today, and there are two that I think just really haven't changed. See if you agree with these. Society, while willing to make room for women, is not willing to make changes for them. So I guess that hasn't really changed, has it, Sam?
That's not really changed, has it? No, unfortunately, it hasn't. Yeah,
And
we
her
still
other
find
one
ourselves in that situation.
that I particularly like is, and I think for British here, you could probably also say Scottish. The British civil service is a beautifully designed and effective braking mechanism. And I think as someone who often has to wrestle in her day job with civil servants, I would have some sympathy with that. And as I say, she did get a lot of criticism. She was a fairly unkempt woman. She didn't have a nice, pretty hairstyle. She didn't care about her personal appearance, and she got a lot of criticism for that. So that's another thing that hasn't changed, that women, especially women in politics, are constantly judged, not by what they do, but how they look. So rest in peace, Shirley Williams. To this young, burgeoning socialist, you were someone to aspire to. She wanted, as a young girl herself, to be the first British Prime Minister, a woman Prime Minister, and she admitted herself she just didn't have the cut and thrust, she didn't have the raw ambition, and she just frankly wasn't nasty enough to proceed with that. So rest in peace. That brings us to the end of the programme. Thank you very much, Sam, for joining me today to talk about the main stories. We've covered a lot of different things. As usual, of course, we have to remind you that making Broadcasting Scotland programmes takes money. And we would like very much for you, if you've enjoyed this, to consider supporting what we do. The website is on the screen, www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Please have a look at it and see if you can consider making a donation to help us continue. We're a professional outfit, but it costs money to do that. If we had 1% of the budget that BBC Scotland had, just think what we could do. So once again, Sam, thank you for joining me. I'll be back on Wednesday night for Scotland at 7 then. Thank you and good evening.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
Are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.